Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
Michael, a pleasure to be with you once again this week. A special edition of Florida Roundtable. We're going to be joined later on in this hour by one of the nation's leading military historians, Patrick K. O'Donnell. He's the author of Washington's Immortals, and he has a new work called The Unknowns, the untold story of America's unknown soldier and World War I's most decorated heroes who brought him home. 100 years later. Why? We'll find out. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.
Do you have an idea for an invention or new product? Do you think companies would be interested in your idea? Do you want to try to get a patent? Then call InventHelp now. InventHelp keeps your idea confidential and explains every step of the invention process. We create professional materials representing your idea and submit it to companies who are looking for new ideas. We have more than 9,000 companies who have agreed to review ideas in confidence. If a company shows interest in manufacturing your invention, we can negotiate on your behalf. We have helped over 10,000 clients receive patents. We also offer services including 3D modeling and animation demonstrating your idea, prototyping services, and we use state-of-the-art technology to show InventHelp client ideas to additional companies. Join the thousands of people just like you who chose InventHelp to pursue their idea. We are experienced. We are working for you. We are InventHelp.
Call us for free information at 1-800-542-6751. That's 1-800-542-6751. Again, 1-800-542-6751.
I'm gonna clean the tub and shower. It's a big job, so nobody interrupt me.
Okay.
After my shower or bath, I'll spray Wet and Forget Shower on and rinse it clean tomorrow. Easy. Now I have time for a nice long bubble bath.
Hey, hon, you need a hand?
Could you make dinner?
Sure.
Make cleaning easier. Pick up Wet and Forget Shower today at participating Ace, Do It, Best, True Value, or visit wetandforget.com for a store near you.
Hello, I'm Florida Forest Service Director Jim Carlos. Despite recent rains, Florida is still in a drought. Downed trees and debris from last year's hurricanes have created hazardous fuels for potentially deadly wildfires that can start and spread quickly and rapidly. Be careful with all fires. Obey Florida's outdoor burning laws, never burn on windy days, and never leave a fire unattended. Report any suspicious fires to the nearest Florida Forest Service office or call 911. For more information on how you can be fire-wise, visit floridaforestservice.com.
This is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
Michael, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, a special edition of the Florida Roundtable today. Patrick O'Donnell, one of the nation's leading military historians, has written a book called The Unknowns. It is a story of World War I. We are in the 100th anniversary of World War I. World War I, 100 years later. Why should we care?
Well, tell us, Reagan, why we should care. I mean, I think we should care, and if you read the book, you will understand why we should care for sure.
Absolutely. It does affect us as we live our lives this day.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
The roots of today's world problems, particularly those in the Middle East, are found in the outcome of World War I. Entangling alliances, Germany, France, England, Russia, Italy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. If you shoot him, I'll shoot you because I have a treaty with his uncle. That kind of thing. And when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary and his wife were assassinated in Sarajevo, all the pieces started falling together, and it didn't take long before all of Europe was embroiled in this war because an archduke was shot and killed by the Black Hand in Sarajevo. I don't think we do that anymore. Although the argument could be made that we we have done that, the nuclear umbrella and all those kind of things. But entangling alliances and mishandled negotiations, the end of World War I was an absolute disaster.
Right. Most historians will agree, and I'm sure you would as well, that it led to World War II.
Absolutely. Woodrow Wilson was on his high horse, his head in the clouds, and his feet planted firmly 10 feet above the earth. He had his 14 points. He wanted his League of Nations. And I think that one of the greatest lines that came out of the Versailles negotiations at the end of World War I, David Lloyd George was there, and Vittorio Orlando. Lloyd George was not a fan of Woodrow Wilson. They did not particularly get along, even though we were supposed to be the best of allies.
Right.
And, of course, Woodrow Wilson, the 14 points, most of them pretty specific about arms limitations and things of that nature. But the League of Nations was his big deal. And Lloyd George looked at Wilson's 14 points. The Allies were not as optimistic or what's the word I'm looking for? They didn't have their head in the clouds like Wilson did. They wanted reparations. They're looking for the money. Lloyd George said, Woodrow Wilson has 14 points by which we should run the world. God only had 10.
Yeah, I remember that quote.
He says, we'll see, and so you can look around today, and the roots of everything we see going on, these fellas didn't even know when they were redrawing the maps of the Middle East.
Right.
Sometimes they had to stop during the negotiations and ask people to come in and show them. They didn't even know where these countries were.
Yeah.
But the maps were drawn, and there you are. And along came the 1920s, and our headaches started that continue even until the moment that you are listening to this very program.
Yeah, and we'll definitely find out more about this from our author.
We certainly will. Well, as I said, we're going to be joined by Patrick K. O'Donnell. He is the author of Washington's Immortals. He has written The Unknowns. It is the untold story of America's unknown soldiers and World War I's decorated heroes. Michael and I have read this book. It's an outstanding thing, and we know that Patrick will have plenty of information for you that makes it relevant to this very day, as I said. This is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And we'll continue the conversation in a moment.
A scripture that I share with couples before marriage is don't let the sun set on your anger because the devil will get a foothold in your life. My paraphrase. And not just couples. Differences exist in any kind of relationship with friends, family, and colleagues. We will all be tempted to lose our cool, but when we do, we need to deal with the situation immediately. Don't let it simmer, making the problem grow even greater. If you've wronged someone, confess your sin first to God and then go to that person. Ask for forgiveness and keep it simple. I was wrong. I'm sorry. No excuses. With excuses, it's no longer an apology. God's word is clear. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. So don't let the sun go down in your anger. Confront it. Confess it. Thankfully, Jesus understands and forgives us. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click Devotions to read the daily devotion and send to a friend.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Precious rose, you color our world till insects and disease turn it upside down. So we've created Bayer Advanced All-in-One Rose and Flower Care. It's the no-spray formula that works 3 ways, controlling bugs and disease as it feeds for brighter, more vibrant flowers. So count your blessings and stop to smell the scientific advances. Available in easy-to-use liquid and granules. Bayer Advanced. Better science, better results. BayerAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, as promised, we are joined at this point in the program by a gentleman who I truly believe is one of the leading military historians in the United States today. He is a good friend to this program and has been here many times, I think, going back to his very first military work. Patrick K. O'Donnell. Patrick, welcome back to the Florida Roundtable.
It's great to be back, my friend.
Well, Pat, you have, before we get to the unknowns, you've been a busy fellow since the last time you were here. I know that you've done some things out in California that were very impressive, and I just wanted you to take a minute and talk about a couple of the things that have happened to you since we last visited.
Well, I spoke at the Reagan Ranch. That was a tremendous honor. We had my best-selling book, Washington's Immortals, which we talked about on your show, went through, I think, about 15 reprints. It was a tremendous success, and did a national book tour. I'm in the beginning of the national book tour for Untold, and I'm really excited about it. I mean, the week before it actually officially came out, the debut day on Amazon, it was #1 for nonfiction in the world, which was a tremendous honor. And I'm just getting a lot of great reviews for the book. It's really exciting.
Well, and they are very well deserved. And it is always a pleasure to have you with us, Patrick. How many years has it been? I was having difficulty remembering since you got started here.
My first book was in, I believe, 2001 or 2000, and I was on your show for Beyond Valor.
Yeah.
That was my first book, which is an oral history of the Rangers and Airborne. And in many ways, I just kind of got my start by interviewing World War II veterans. I've interviewed over 4,000, and then you add in Korean War veterans with a book called Give Me Tomorrow. The Pacific War, there's the OSS. I interviewed hundreds of men and women spies and operative spies and saboteurs, and another great book, The Brenner Assignment, and They Dared Return. So it's been a lifelong passion is to preserve American history and these stories, and finding and uncovering kind of untold history is my specialty, if you will, or forte. And the unknowns is no different in that long line. It's as I like to say, the story found me, and in that sense, the story found me when I was in France, and I was giving a tour to the Wounded Warrior Regiment of the Marine Corps. We were touring Omaha Beach and in the other landing sites in Normandy, as were the airborne drop zones. And part of that tour also involved the great World War I battlefield at Bellewood, where the Marine Corps stopped a major German drive on Paris. It was potentially a war-winning drive for Germany, but the Marine Corps in the 2nd Division, along with some other Americans, halted that drive. And it was there that our guide, who was my fellow guide, sort of said, oh, by the way, Ernest A. Jansen was the first Medal of Honor recipient for the Marine Corps and was also a body bearer for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I was immediately, my interest was piqued. I'm like, what is a body bearer? And then secondly, why did Pershing select this individual, and who were the other men that were selected to be part of the Unknown Soldier? And then as I dug into this thing, the story of the Unknown Soldier is a story that's largely untold. And this book tells that story, and it tells the stories of each of these 8 men and who they were, which tells the whole story of the AEF through their eyes. And they were in some of the most intense combat of World War I. Many of these men received the Medal of Honor, and each one of the stories is written cinematically in the unknowns. And it, in some ways, could be its own movie. They're so powerful. And I was just, the more I explored the book, the more interested I got in the subject and became sort of obsessed in many ways.
You know, one thing you really outline really well in the book is just how brutal these battles were in World War I. Do you feel like a lot of Americans don't really know the history because we focus a lot on World War II. I mean, I really didn't know a lot of the history until I read your book. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, it's absolutely true, Mike. The Americans have really no concept of World War One. In some ways, it's kind of a bookend, or it's a middle matter between the Civil War and World War II. It's a largely forgotten war, but it's an important war. It's a war that changed our world and continues to change our world today. Just look at the Middle East. I mean, that the former Ottoman Empire was carved up after the war and is now many of the artificial countries that we see today, like Syria and Iraq. And, personally, it was a place that touched me. I was in Fallujah, and I wrote a book called We Were One, which is on the Commandant's reading list. The place almost killed me. And, we were walking around Bella Wood, many of the men I had fought with in Fallujah, and that was sort of a full circle moment. The fact that this war touched our lives and continues to touch our lives. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to bring out with The Unknowns is why it's important. And then it's also a war that most people have no clue. It's not only just about the brutal nature of the combat, which it really was, and you get into the gas and the high explosive shells and the machine guns, but there's also a lot of courage and sacrifice of stories that I think really resonate with people and are just incredibly compelling. It's a hidden side of World War I that I don't think most people realize, and I think that the book I really wanted to bring out with The Unknowns is that aspect of the war. And it's why it's important to know what these individuals did, what they did in World War I, and because it continues to impact our lives today.
I think that anybody who is perhaps over about 30 years old or so, you were alive when the last World War I veteran in the United States passed away. I was fortunate enough to know two grandfathers who both served in World War I on both sides of the family. And the grandfather on my mother's side is the one who instilled this love of history in me. He was not afraid to talk about his participation in some of the battles that you recount in this book, and it was important. But yet, it's still very relevant, as you say today. This business of naming an unknown was not necessarily popular among the fellows who fought in World War I, and in the people here at home, or the government. And I think that in itself is a fascinating story. This idea kind of comes out of England and France, and the United States is not real warm to it.
It was the idea is the way it germinates is quite interesting for an unknown soldier. In World War I, there were about 2,500 Americans that were listed as unknown. In other words, there were remains in France, and they didn't know who the bodies were. Initially, the American government thought that they could identify all those people, and there would be no need for an unknown. But then there was also an issue of there were thousands, tens of thousands of Americans that were still in France. Their bodies were there. So the first step was that the government offered anybody that had lost a loved one or a family member to bring home the remains for free and then rebury them in the United States. And then there became kind of a movement to honor the fallen. And it first starts in England and France, and they want to sort of memorialize all of the sacrifice for any individual that fell with the tomb of an unknown soldier. It represents all of those who sacrificed or gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country. And there became a movement here in the United States, and it's quite interesting. The woman that was the editor of a very popular women's magazine at the time, The Delineator, kind of the cosmopolitan of its day, during the turn of the century, said, hey, we kind of need something like that here. And there became a movement to bring, a single unknown soldier home and honor him. And Hamilton Fish, who was a congressman in New York, who fought with the Harlem Hellfighters, which was a segregated African American and included Puerto Rican Americans in the Great War, offered up a bill to create a tomb for the unknown and the entire ceremony. And then what was necessary was to select the individual, which I can get into, and then then General Pershing personally handpicked 8 enlisted men to bring back the remains themselves. And what you have is that these 8 men represent the entire story of the AEF through their actions. It's each branch of the service, the Navy, it's the Army and the Marine Corps, and then within each one of those branches, the specializations, and everything from the cavalry to the combat engineers to field artillery to the infantry, and then the Navy. The stories there are just intimate and incredible.
Isn't it true as well that, that you're talking about the AEF, there was some on the British and French side who wanted to split up the American troops and make them a part of their own divisions, and the AEF said, no, we want to be a unified fighting force, and there was a little bit of a struggle there at first, wasn't there?
Not a little bit. It was a constant struggle throughout the war. And, The Unknowns is sort of a book within many books. This book provides you with the underlying history of the American Expeditionary Force in France and the struggles that it had. When the American Expeditionary Force was first stood up, it was the United States had the 16th or 17th largest army in the world. It was about 220,000 men that were in the regular armed forces. We had to grow that to over 4 million, and that's an extraordinary story in and of itself.
And Patrick,
a modern fighting force.
I tell you what, Patrick, we are caught by the clock here. We're going to have to pause along our line, but hold that thought. We'll let you come back and tell that story because it's a very important one. But at this point in time, we must remind folks that they are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is military historian Patrick K. O'Donnell. His brand new book, The Unknowns, the untold story of America's unknown soldier and the most decorated heroes who brought him home. It is from Grove Atlantic Press, available in all the fine bookstores around Florida. Stay put. Our conversation continues following these messages.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bayer Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bayer Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BayerAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Years after her husband first arrived in Belle Glade, Florida from Haiti, Stephanie finally had her family together again. But her husband and daughter became disabled. So now, Stephanie supports them, working brutal 15-hour days in the farm fields. At the Glades Initiative, we connect Stephanie and others with food and social services. Help us help them have decent lives together. Visit GladesInitiative.org.
One time he forgot to fuel up the boat. And it wouldn't be the first time he left his tackle box behind. On one trip he even headed out without his lucky hat. And seems he almost always forgets to wear his sunscreen. But he never forgets to wear the one thing that could save his life. Life jackets save lives. Wear it, Florida.
Visit myfwc.com for more information.
Is your yard a glorious utopia? One that deserves protection from the invasion of blackberry? If so, then your passion is our passion. That's why Bayer Advanced has made Brush Killer Plus. It uses a systemic formula that kills blackberry to the root. And it's now available in a new 1.3-gallon, ready-to-use pump sprayer, making it even easier to apply. Brush Killer Plus from Bayer Advanced. Your passion is our passion. Visit BayerAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Leaving tobacco behind isn't an easy task. In all honesty, it's a very hard thing to do. The good news is, if you want to quit, Tobacco Free Florida offers free help, support, and the tools you'll need to succeed. Area Health Education Centers offer free classes that are run by professionals who know what you're up against. It's comforting to have a face-to-face conversation with a person who knows exactly what you're going through as you begin your quit journey. If you've tried to quit tobacco before, or if you've been avoiding trying to quit, now is the right time for you to succeed. Area Health Education Centers offer free classes that are designed to help you quit and offer free nicotine replacement therapy like patches, lozenges, and gum. Remember, it's free, so you have nothing to lose. There's a quitter in you, and with the help of Tobacco Free Florida's 3 ways to quit, you'll double your chances of success. If you or someone you know needs help quitting tobacco, you can call 1-877-YOU-CAN-NOW or visit us at tobaccofreeflorida.com.
We tend to focus on the material and the temporal and neglect the eternal and relational. But none of us knows the number of days that God has planned for us. Don't put off until tomorrow the really important things you can do today, like getting right with God and getting right with others. God became a man in the person of Jesus to show us how. Start by getting right with God through Jesus. Then show your family how much you love them. If you're married or a parent, surprise them by occasionally coming home early. Tell them you love them. Plan fun things to do with them. Help someone you care about, someone who needs you at the office or in the neighborhood, or maybe someone who needs a friend. Maybe just be someone to listen and hold a hand. Even seek to be right with those who are not for you. It may not be the last day that you live here on earth, but it may become a great day for you and those you care about. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org. That's rightfromtheheart.org.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is one of the country's leading military historians, Patrick O'Donnell. His brand new book, The Unknowns, the untold story of America's unknown soldier and World War I's most decorated heroes who brought him home. It is from Grove Atlantic. It is available in all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. And Patrick, it is always a great pleasure to have you with us. As we came to the end of that last segment, you were talking about the importance of the fight over keeping the American forces together. The French wanted to just patch them in at company level or a little bit larger where they were needed. And General Pershing took this stance that no. The Americans fight together and remain as an army. And I want you to pick up that story and continue with that.
General Pershing was given essentially 2 orders by the Secretary of War at the time and through the President himself. The first order was to keep the American Army together and independent and always fight independently. And the other order was to come home alive and healthy. And the main order though was to fight independently and create the army. The British and French wanted to take the American doughboys and basically put them into the depleted French and British armies and let them fight in battalion-sized strength. They would have been effectively cannon fodder and fought, with the same tactics as French and English, and the casualties would have been absolutely enormous. We wouldn't have really had any kind of political sway at the end of the war had we done that. And there's also a question whether or not the war would have even been won if that tactic was employed. To Pershing's great credit, he navigated some very tricky political waters and diplomatic waters and was able to keep the army largely intact. And by the end of the war, in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, for instance, the army was over 1 million strong in that sector alone. It's really quite an achievement. And you mentioned earlier about your grandfather, who went over and you had his diary, and he was from the New England area. One of the stories in this book is from the 26th Division, and it involves a terrier dog named Sergeant Stubby. and he's one of the supporting characters in this book, which is, I think, quite an interesting story. He was the mascot for one of the units, and fights in and around the trenches. There's a little movie out, animated movie now, which I think is quite good. But there's a true story behind it, and the dog was quite remarkable. Saved some people's lives. Was able to warn people about gas attacks that were impending, and just quite one of the interesting stories within the unknowns that just really puts a human face, or not in this case, but it humanizes the war in a sense, and it gives people an understanding of what it was like.
Another point that I think is very important, and that is new technology, the early part of the 20th century. But this is the war that brings us poison gas and tanks and long-range artillery and changed the face of the way war is fought.
This is the Civil War on steroids. It's the changing face of battle from infantry tactics where people marched in line in large columns and formations, and it's changed suddenly by the technology that's on the battlefield. The machine gun, for instance, is able to annihilate. A small machine gun team could take out thousands of individuals if it's properly placed, and there's a high explosive artillery shells in the gas, which is just so deadly. It's hard to imagine fighting in the trenches, but then fighting wearing a gas mask for hours, sleeping in it. This stuff was persistent, it was constant, and you had to be vigilant, because if you didn't have it on, even for a couple seconds, you could take your life, or severely scar your lungs. There's different types of gas, which I get into in the book. There's mustard gas, for instance, which is these oily droplets that are, it just gets under the skin and irritates everything, and even forces you in some cases to take your mask off, and you can get hit with another type of gas. Extremely brutal and difficult to fight in, and I think that's one of the great stories in the book too, is just how that generation of doughboys, largely untrained, innovated and overcame and defeated one of the greatest armies of the world at the time, the German army. And they did it with bad training, improper training, but they were able to figure it out on their own. And were an incredible army by the time the war ended.
One thing you talk about a little bit in the book are some figures who would become major figures and play major roles in World War II, including the likes of Marshall and Patton. Talk a little bit about their roles in World War I, which isn't as well known.
George Marshall initially is just a lowly major, but he has a brilliant mind, and Pershing relies upon George Marshall to be his primary planner for all of the major battles during World War I. And some of these things are just extraordinary feats of logistics, just moving a massive army over all these tiny French roads that are not very well developed, and they have to do it under the cloak of darkness, under the Germans' eyes. And they're, George Marshall was able to pull off two major offensives, one at St. Mihiel and the other at the Meuse-Argonne, in, short order. It's quite an extraordinary story of planning and logistics and execution and organization. He does that very well. And, that's the seeds are planted there for his, the ultimate great success in World War II. And then you have George Patton, his story is told in the unknowns as well. He's, cavalry officer, an expert with the sword. He's able to fence, and he's a great horseback rider. And he goes over in the first wave on General Pershing's staff on the USS on the SS Baltic, and starts to plan things. And the tank is just coming into its own in World War I. The British first develop it, and the Americans don't have their own tank corps, so they have to rely upon the Allies' tanks. Initially, they start to produce French tanks in America, but it's at the very end of the war. And Patton organizes the nascent tank corps and goes into battle with them, and it's classic Patton. I mean, he's innovative. He's way ahead of his time, even with these tanks that sputter around 3 miles an hour. they're at lightning speed then. But there's some really extraordinary stories in there about how Patton is in battle, and one of them was really quite striking. It's a precursor to his story about slapping a man in Sicily in World War II. He saw a man that he thought was cowering in battle, and Patton was absolutely fearless, even when he was under fire and he was wounded. There was one incident where he slashed a man with his entrenching tool, and he's not sure if he even killed him because he was cowering in the face of battle. Quite a ruthless commander that eventually was very effective during World War II.
Patrick, we got about a minute and a half here, but I want you to start this and we'll come back to it. I don't want to give too much away. Hopefully we're going to create some curiosity here and folks want to pick up this book and read. But how the fellas were selected, the body bearers, these are not high-ranking officers. These are our heroes. Actually, we have a little bit less than a minute, but if you can, start that process and then we'll come back to it.
The important thing is just what you said. These are not officers that were seated behind a desk that were planning things. These were men on the ground that were doing extraordinary things. And each one of the stories is a sort of a snapshot of a different aspect of the American Expeditionary Force in France. And the Unknowns really capture some extraordinary stories of sacrifice and courage. And in each case, I think some could be movies.
I tell you what, and you're absolutely right. We'll leave it there. We'll come back to that in just a moment, but we remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our special guest today is Patrick O'Donnell. His brand new book, The Unknowns, from Grove Atlantic, is available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and Amazon.com, and we'll continue the conversation in a moment.
Are you or a loved one turning or about to turn 65? Then now's the time to start thinking about your health care needs, specifically Medicare. If you're new to Medicare, there are a lot of options to choose from, and the whole process can be confusing. But the licensed insurance agents at Easy Medicare can help you find the right Medicare plan based on your budget and health care needs. Call Easy Medicare today and they'll guide you through the process. Whether you're completely new to it all or looking to improve on an existing Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan, Easy Medicare can help you find a plan that best suits you and your health care needs. Visit easymedicare.com/radio. EasyMedicare.com is a non-government site. It is an affiliate of eTelequote Insurance, Inc., a private licensed representative of Medicare insurance organizations with a Medicare contract. Sales agents may be compensated based on your enrollment in a health plan. Receiving quotes from our website and from our licensed insurance agents is always free and you're under no obligation to purchase any services.
800-957-6213. 800-957-6213. That's 800-957-6213.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
Floridians love boating with family and friends, exploring our state's amazing waterways. But even experienced boaters can lose sight of the risks of passengers standing or sitting in improper locations. Bow riding by passengers of any age is extremely dangerous. Be sure that passengers only sit or stand in designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Patrick O'Donnell. His brand new book, The Unknowns, The Untold Story of America's Unknown Soldier and World War I's most decorated heroes who brought him home. From Grove Atlantic, and it is available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. And Patrick, we had just started talking about the process of selecting the common soldiers, the 8 body bearers that brought the unknown home, and I wanted you to continue that story for us.
Yes, General Pershing really had a sense of fairness when he selected these men. He wanted somebody that represented each branch of service: the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. And the Unknowns really it fleshes out the story of the Marine Corps in World War I, which is an amazing story, as well as the Army and the Navy. But that story of the Marine Corps and how they had a large role at Bella Wood, defending blocking a major German drive on Paris, and then fighting throughout the war. But each one of these men was a highly decorated, in most cases, enlisted man. They were all enlisted men. That it really brings you to the ground level fighting in the war, World War I. It's either it puts you on a ship, in some cases on a submarine, or in the trenches, or in the wheat fields as they're advancing through the wheat, facing Maxim machine guns and gas. It really it puts you there, and I think that's the key. But it also tells the full story of the American Expeditionary Force, and that's a really quite an amazing and remarkable story.
Well, now, when these fellas were selected, and then they had to narrow it down to one, was that done in Europe first, or did they share a little bit of that story?
No, it was actually done in the United States. They went through the various files that these men had, and then they went ahead and selected people that were still in the military at the time. And then they wanted to select people that were within each specialization. They wanted to really sort of tell the story of America's role in World War I through their eyes. And each one of these men, it's a really unique story. For instance, Ernest A. Jansen, who's the first Medal of Honor recipient for the Marine Corps in World War I. His story is epic. They cross on June 6, 1918. They have to cross a wheat field outside of Bella Wood under very, very heavy German machine gun fire. Many men die. They seize the high ground, Hill 142, and they're setting up. They barely take the hill against the German battalion. And the Germans immediately counterattack and try to take the hill back. And this is a time when the German army was never really beaten in the field, so by the Allies. So this is an extraordinary time frame. And Jansen and his men have to hold that hill. And Jansen sees that there are several machine guns being set up and literally charges them with his bayonet and disrupts the machine guns and saves the hill, and has a role in the battle itself in saving that at Bella Wood. But we follow Jansen's company, the 49th, throughout the whole war in major battles at Saint Mihiel and a forgotten place, a fortress called Blanc-Mont. And he's just one of the stories. And there's also the Navy that I think that those stories are incredible. One man saves his entire ship by his sacrifices, by closing a watertight door, even though he's practically burned alive. But those are just, some of the stories of courage and sacrifice in this book.
And what is the main thing that you want readers to get out of this book?
The Unknowns, I want people to walk away with an appreciation and understanding of the sacrifices of the doughboy generation. It's a forgotten generation. And in some ways, it's a generation like the generation of today that's fighting, wars in Iraq and Syria. And they're in front of us, but in some cases a forgotten generation as well. And I think that their stories are just as important as the stories of World War II or the stories of the Civil War. It's about American sacrifice, American courage and valor. And I think I want people to walk away understanding and appreciating it, and then also understanding and appreciating that World War I is an event that remade our world. It changed. It became the American century. It's the turning point between the old world and the new world, and it led to so many things, and it still casts a shadow over our lives today. So I want people on this 100th anniversary to think about it, World War I, and sort of go back in time to these stories of these men, and to gain a little bit of an understanding of what it was like.
And every Memorial Day and Veterans Day and whatnot, when we see presidents and whatnot go to the tomb of the unknown at Arlington, this took a long time. Warren Harding was in the White House and was there at the commemoration. Woodrow Wilson in poor health, but was still alive. And Arlington was not necessarily the first choice of this thing.
There was a real debate where we would place the unknown once he was brought back from France. And the decision was made to make it Arlington. And I think that the tomb is a national symbol of who we are as Americans. It memorializes the sacrifices of all that have fallen, as well as the sacrifices of those who have served. And the tomb itself, as well as the burial of the unknown, it was a sense of great healing. It was trying to put closure on the war to some degree to those who have lost loved ones, but it was a chance to bring many Americans together in 1921. And one of my favorite stories is about Chief Plentyclews, who was a Plains war chief that was one of the last speakers to speak at the Tomb of the Unknown. And he places his war staff on the top of the casket and says some beautiful words. And this was the ceremony itself was a chance to bring Americans together, like Chief Plentyclews, who we had fought against during the Great Plains War. And one of the body bearers himself, Corporal Saunders, was a Native American that was a combat engineer that had to breach the wire. He was there as well as many other walks of American life.
Patrick, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but it is a marvelous story, one that we hope folks will pick up and read and understand. The Unknowns, the untold story of America's unknown soldier and World War I's most decorated heroes who brought him home. It's from Grove Atlantic, available at all the Vine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. Patrick K. O'Donnell, and I say this in all sincerity, Patrick, I do believe you have become one of our country's leading military historians here in the 21st century, and we certainly do hope you'll come back and do this again when the next one's ready.
It's a privilege to be on your show. I really appreciate it, my friend. I mean, you're a great, history professor. You guys really, dig into the heart of the book and the essence of the book, and it's really just a privilege to come on the show.
Patrick, thank you so much. We will talk again. We'll remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
We'll be back with a closing thought in a moment.
There's no question you need omega-3s. But which form should you take? Fish oil or krill oil? Scientists have debated this for years. Luckily, there's a new solution to satisfy everyone. It's called Krill Omega 50 Plus. It combines ultra-pure fish oil and joint-soothing krill oil together in just one tiny pill. It's so powerful, it can promote the health of your heart and your arteries. And if that wasn't enough, it can also boost your joint comfort in just days. We're so sure Krill Omega 50 Plus will work for you, we'll even send you a free bottle to put to the test. The debate is over. It's not fish oil or krill oil. It's both. And now it's free. Just pay $4.95 for shipping and claim your free bottle. Call now.
800-712-8055. 800-712-8055. That's 800-712-8055.
Hello, I'm Florida Forest Service Director Jim Carls. Despite recent rains, Florida is still in a drought. Downed trees and debris from last year's hurricanes have created hazardous fuels for potentially deadly wildfires that can start and spread quickly and rapidly. Be careful with all fires. Obey Florida's outdoor burning laws, never burn on windy days, and never leave a fire unattended. Report any suspicious fires to the nearest Florida Forest Service office or call 911. For more information on how you can be fire-wise, visit floridaforestservice.com.
Nothing's better than taking to Florida's waterways with family and friends. But some boat operators don't realize that bow riding is extremely dangerous. It can lead to tragic accidents if someone falls overboard because of speed or direction changes. Be sure your passengers sit only in manufacturer-designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. Employflorida.com. That's employflorida.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And when I said a brief closing thought, we mean a brief closing thought. Patrick O'Donnell, always a pleasure to have him here. We've known him for a good number of years now, and I'm not kidding. I consider him to be one of the leading military historians of our time.
Yeah, so knowledgeable about military history.
This book, The Unknowns, and I think it personalizes brave men. Their names have fallen into the crevice of history, and he has brought them back, put them forefront, and, of course, the Tomb of the Unknown is one of our most prominent military monuments of the country for the last nearly 100 years, and it's very important. So we hope that you will pick up The Unknowns and give it a good read. We say thank you for your time this day. We know you have lots of choices out there. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And we will see you again next week with another very special edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.